Okay, so today I'm working with, this is a 10 by 10 canvas, just your standard, Blick canvas. I really like these. For the most part, they're stretched really nice, and they're smooth enough for me to work on, and I really enjoy them. I haven't pre-gessoed this, and I'm using just Gamsol today and no other mediums. So I like to say that in the beginning because people wonder what mediums I'm using, and all I'm using is the Gamsol. And so we're going to be working from a couple reference photos. We got our Blue Jay, and then we have these. I just got this. These are all royalty-free images off of Pexels or Unsplash. Two great sites to find these royalty-free images. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this class. So I'm going to start with just blocking in some background color. So I'm just going to kind of get this ultramarine blue and a little transparent brown oxide, and I'm just going to kind of gray the background. I'm using this number 10 bright aspen brush that works quite well for everything really, but it's a bigger brush, so I'm trying to make it a little easier. So I'm blocking in with a larger brush. And I'm just using some of that Gamsol to, to spread it around a bit. And then I'm going to use my paper towel, and I'm just going to wipe off this layer and get it kind of spread around. Now I'm using, in my reference photo, I have, and in the thumbnail, but we used for the class, you saw that there's mostly green and orangey colored leaves, but you can, have fun with this. Once you know my technique, you could find reference photos of more, if you want to do more reddy orange leaves, you can mix it up a little. So anyways, I'm going to start with drawing the main branch that this little blue jay is going to sit on. Kind of comes down. And in the reference photo, there's a big twig coming up there, but just to simplify, I just kind of made it an easy kind of little arch that he's sitting on. So I'm just going to use some transparent brown oxide and some of that ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to block in, the main branch there. And we'll be, there's going to be some leaves covering this branch, but for now I just draw the whole thing in. And I'll put in just kind of give an impression of some other branches in there. And then I like to take my paper towel and just kind of wipe the paint up and down like this, because it creates some of those nice, branch-like, the shape of the branch just by doing that with your paper towel. So I kind of will just wipe off some of that with my paper towel, and creates different, branch-like shapes. And then I just kind of go back in and put in some of that darker shadow color. So it looks messy right now, but later on, it'll look really nice when you bring in your background. I'm just lightly using my paper towel to do that. So now I would like to sketch in where my bird is going to go next, because I don't want to put in the leaves yet. I want to kind of know where my little bird's going to go first. So I like this size of canvas because I have lots of room for everything. And also, if you're selling your artwork, and you're using, this is a good painting to do a larger painting on this size of canvas, because you can fill it in quite easily with all those leaves. And so it's just a good one to do a little bit larger scale. A lot more room for all those, dramatic leaves and everything to go in. So I'm just looking at my reference photo, and I'm just kind of, the best way to look at the blue jay is to really look at where the dark is, the black part on his face, and let that be, your main guide there. So you can really see those shapes. So they're going to be the easiest ways to gauge the size, and for example, the space around his eye. And then this line carries down right into where this curve starts to go down. So, and then it comes under this shape here. So we're just going to look at it as a series of shapes. And that's how, we paint everything, just sort of looking at it like shapes. And I'm just going to quickly kind of sketch in his body here. And then I'll work more on those details. Just looking at those main angles, and I can later go and adjust them a little. But I'm just kind of looking at those main angles, like his head comes down, and then it goes into his kind of his shoulders, and the shoulders kind of line up. So that's another thing to pay attention to. And then the little tail. And each time I paint them, they're not always exact, because you pick up different, you just pick up different things depending on the day. Some days I'll have a better time drawing the eyes and the beak, and some days, just won't go as easy. So that's why they all look different. So I'm just kind of looking at the general shape, and I'm looking at the angle of his forehead. So, you know, the beak, I've got to extend my beak a little. He's got quite a large beak. Now, if you're painting a bird, you know, that has a beak that's quite large like this, and you want your bird to look a little less, more feminine, or more, you know, more, I don't know what the word is, like cute, you just make the beak a little bit smaller. That's just a trick. If you make the beak bigger, it looks more serious. It's gonna go hunting. So I'm mostly using very thin paint because I am helping. It's a guide for myself to see, you know, is my drawing, you know, somewhat accurate? Just kind of looking at those shapes where it gets dark, putting them in, and I can always adjust it at this stage because the paint's very thin. So I don't have lots of black paint or lots of anything on there, so it's at a very, you know, flexible stage. And might even add a little bit of that cobalt blue in there, and just kind of want to make sure I have that angle where his shoulder comes out there. So this has to come out a little more. So it's pretty good. It's not, you know, 100%, you know, perfect, but it's good enough for the demo. And tail, I kind of leave more for brushwork later. I don't want to get too detailed with the tail. I'd rather put that in more as a brush stroke than too much drawing. It starts to get too tight. So now that I kind of know where my bird is, I can get my larger brush again. This is the number 10. And I'm going to start blocking in some of those colors, those leaf colors. So, you know, you can get a little bit of, I get a little bit of that terp on my brush. And I'm looking at those kind of pretty orangey leaves, yellowy leaves. And I'm going to start with a little Indian yellow and some transparent red oxide, and you'll get something kind of goldeny, and we'll see how that goes. And so I'm gonna just you know, roughly put in some of that transparent color. Not worried too much at this point at the details of each, you know, of each leaf. And like I say, you could add a little alizarin in there just to, you know, get some. I didn't put too much red in mine, but you can add more if you want. Some people really prefer it over the orange color, and then some people really prefer the orangey colored leaves more. So it's all just up to you what kind of fall leaves you would like to see more. And because the blue jay is blue, you know, allows you some real kind of flexibility there with the colors, whether you want it to be more subtle or more bold with color. It's up to you. So I'm just kind of putting in some of these more goldeny colors first. And this is just the Indian yellow and some of that, you know, red oxide, and And a little touch, in some of them I put a little touch of the alizarin, not much though. So, and I mean, you can have, I left a lot of gray background color coming through, but you can have, you know, a lot more leaves coming through. I just kind of went a little bit with the reference photo and then a little bit with, you know, just kind of intuitive, just, you know, putting on the brush strokes, not thinking too much about the details. So now that I've got some of the nice goldeny colors on there, I want to go and start adding some greens. So I'll start with some sap green, and I'm going to add a little of that transparent red oxide to it just to dull it down, because I'm using a Winsor Newton sap green, and it can be a little bit vivid, like really super bright. So I kind of like to dull it down a little. I'm just going to work in, and as I go along the edge there, you'll see I'm kind of making some leafy shapes. And I'm just kind of marking in some of these greeny colors. And as I go along, you know, as I go over and cover some of this goldeny color, it makes really pretty, you know, pretty shades of green in between. So I'm just kind of working that in. And you can see it's very loose, and kind of right now it's more just kind of, I'm looking at more of the pattern of color, not too worried about how exact any leaf particular is. This is just blocking in more of the color. And you can have fun with this if you do a couple different paintings using this technique. You'll get really used to it. And if I was using if I do this in acrylic, I would do the same thing. Only you could use some of that liquid, you know, gloss medium to spread this layer of paint across across the canvas. So it helps to use a larger brush for this. If I was using any smaller a brush, I wouldn't be able to create these, you know, looser brush strokes. So yeah, this is a nice stage because you're not really tied down to anything yet, but I am kind of paying attention to, you know, just kind of how far down the leaves are going. And on the edges, I am kind of putting in some of that more, you know, leafy shape. I don't have to really, because I can cut the background into it. But you know, when I teach, I overthink a little bit, you know, trying to think what you guys must be thinking when I'm doing this. So I've added a little bit of Viridian green now. Just now you'll see the Viridian makes more of this bluey green. And just adding a few different tones of green like that. So you don't want to start covering up too much of your you know, of the goldy color. So at this point, I'll kind of take my paper towel and I'll just kind of, you know, combine those colors a little. Just kind of, even when you do that, you create kind of different lines and textures in your paint. I really like the transparent, this transparent stage of this painting. I enjoy the fact that you get, you know, and if you're a watercolor painter, you know, you understand, you get that nice kind of glow and loose feeling at this point. So you can let that, you know, sit and then go back and work on the bird for a bit. Or you can look at it at this point and say, you know, how is my light and dark pattern? Well, I know I'm going to have a kind of a, you know, a little cluster of more of these orangey colors here, and then here, and then kind of going back up. So kind of will form a little bit of a V, and then maybe less orange down here. So it kind of keeps your eye around the bird. So I might just, you know, go in while I'm thinking that way and just maybe cut down some of that space there. That way it keeps the brightness up there more. Those are just some of my ideas. I like the strong compositional shape when you have like three. So if it was roses, you'd have like a large rose and a medium and then maybe some small ones. You know, it just creates a real nice, you know, composition. So I'm going to also, you know, later there's some of these sky holes. Later we can also decide to balance the background. We can go and look at how does that background fit back into these. So we'll maybe, you know, we'll pop a few sky holes back into our painting just to also balance the background. So these are just things, you know, that I'm thinking about as I go. So I'm going to go back to blocking in and working on the blue jay some more. And so I want to get, I'm going to use this number 4 silver flat Bristol on. And I like using the flats for some of you that are new, because I like that you can use them to make nice bold strokes, but also you can use the tips of a flat for small details. If your brush isn't too, you know, frayed or anything, you can really, you know, get in there and do small details as well as big brush strokes. So that's why I like them. It's kind of I started using them early on, and I just kind of always, you know, kept going. And yeah, one teacher said, if you use the biggest brush you can, you know, get away with using to create, you know, looser, more fresh, you know, brush strokes. And so I'm just kind of putting in some of that cobalt blue. And then sometimes what I do is I'll wipe it off, and to get, you know, a lighter blue that comes from underneath. When I do that, I get sort of a real light blue by putting it on and then wiping it off. And let's block in some more. So this is just another technique for getting if you want to get a real light blue, I kind of sometimes will use a little terp and some of that cobalt blue, and then just lift off some of that color. It also will help, you know, all the blue underneath show up better because it's kind of cleans the canvas right down. So I'm just putting in some of that cobalt blue, and it's got some white mixed in. And just really simplifying the way this bird kind of has, there's lots of different blues in here, but it's quite kind of light bluey gray up here, but then it goes to these super bright colors down here. So up here, I'm just kind of blocking in some of those paler blues, and I'm just using some cobalt and white. And I could add a little spot of, just a little dab of that, you know, transparent brown oxide, and that will gray it down so it's not so blue. I sometimes just like making them extra blue, even if they look grayer, just depends. And so I'm just kind of blocking in some of that up there. And I'm going to get a smaller brush and work a little bit on his eyes and everything. I like to get the face in there first. So I have another one of those Princeton brushes. This is a number 2, and I got this at Michael's. So I'm going to use some ultramarine blue and a little bit of black for the little mask. And this little brush will be good because it's nice, and it's a good size for getting in these details. Now I'll try to zoom in so you can see better what I'm doing, and try not to block what I'm painting here for you. So they have this little connection here, and then you've got a little eye, and then this little connection kind of goes on an angle down here, and then to the beak. So I really pay attention to the angles of those little lines. And then you've got this one that comes down here, and then it goes all the way down to the shoulder there. And so that's just some black and some ultramarine blue. And then there's even a little bit of a line there. So you want to get those in first, because then it gives you an idea of where everything else is going. And can soften that into that edge. Okay, so then I want to get a little bit of that transparent brown oxide into the white and the cobalt mix, and I just want to get the little, kind of get that little eyelid shape. In there. Maybe add a little more white in there. And this is sort of a grayish white. It's not, you know, pure. This has white and ultramarine blue and some of that transparent brown oxide in there. You can add a little red oxide too if you want to warm it up a little more. Because birds always have some of that warm color in their feathers. You know, it's not, kind of has always a little bit of that, you know, it leans towards a little bit of that browny white around their eyes and whatnot. So I like to start with that and then kind of build up to more of a highlight. It's got some light blue fluffy feathers kind of on his nose, on his beak there, and then it kind of gets lighter. But I like to try to leave that little line there between, because that shows those little feathers that kind of go out onto his beak. You can add a little more blue to them so that you can really see what they are. And they kind of carry on here. And we got, I just kind of will drag some of those edges, even though it's getting too detail work for this soon, I still do it. It gets me inspired, you know. You have to, as you go along, find little wins where you go, okay, that's good. My painting will carry on okay. Even if the rest of it you can't get, just work on an area that you can really, that you know you can get through, and then the rest of it will probably come easier too. So that's just a block in of those colors. There's really not too much detail yet, and I'm just going to keep blocking in, and I want to work on this is just some cobalt blue and white, just something a little bit more darker there. And just kind of going to block in some more. Now for these bright feathers, there's some really, all these little square shapes, and there's a lot of detail in the blue jay. All these little kind of square shapes here. So you have to kind of simplify that. So that's what we'll do next. So there's some pretty vivid blues in there. So what I like to do is I'll get something like some ultramarine blue, maybe some cobalt blue, and I'm just gonna first put in some of that bright blue paint, and same with here where there's some really bright squares of color that come through on the blue jay's wings. So, you know, there's different things you can do to mix up really bright blues. You could use a little phthalo blue if you've got it, you know, something really bright. And I'm just using something easy like this ultramarine blue and some cobalt blue, and then I'm using a technique to get a bright blue by, you know, I'm going to wipe off some of that blue, and it doesn't look like too much now, but when you add the black in there and some more white and a few highlights, it shows up. So this is one method I like to use. You can even that gets some real vivid blue in there. So that's one thing I want to do, is get in all that blue. And now I'm going to switch to a bigger brush, and I'm going to keep blocking in the back and using cobalt and some white. And you can, this one I did a little more of a looser style brush stroke for this painting, for this class. You know, when you sign up, there's a picture. So I'll try to show you exactly. So using this larger brush, this is a number 4 flat, you can make these kind of more, you know, modern brush strokes. You don't have to, they don't have to all be feathery. You can make a few feathery, but you can have some nice bold brush strokes in there. And I'm just kind of putting some of that on the tail. Now, before I get carried away, which is easy to do, especially with something so bright blue like this, you can really lose track of what you're doing. What you want to do next is, I'm just going to put the kind of the tip of his wing there. Okay, before I get too carried away, you want to get, you can use a smaller brush. Go back to this little number 2 bright, because the edge is nice and clean and sharp, and get a little bit of that black and some ultramarine blue. And I want to just kind of rough in some of those feathers. So there's, you know, there's hundreds of these little black designs. I just call them squares. There's all kinds of these little, you know, squares and dots, and it's very beautiful. So we just have to simplify it though. So I'm going to look at the main wing here. There's a bunch of white there. So maybe what I'll do is I was going to go with the black first, but maybe I'll just put in a bit of that white shape that's there, so I know. And then there's 2 main kind of white tips there. And then down here.
Krista, is that pure white or is that a light gray mix?
That's just white with my paintbrush is a little bit dirty. You know, it's got some of the blue, but it's pretty much white has a little blue from the feathers kind of mixing in a bit. So I'm just gonna put in a few of those white details just so I know. And then I'm gonna go back now and add some of those black shapes. So now I'm gonna go back and make sure your brush is clean, or you'll end up with your black lines won't be very. And this is really simplifying down. So there's just some of those little marks I'm putting in for now. And then here there's a bunch. So I'm really simplifying because the bird is covered in these little details. And here you can't really see many because the wing is kind of wrapping around. And then I'll do some on the tail. Okay, so I'm just using the tip of my brush, and I'm kind of, it's just very abstract of what's really there, because you would have to be, it'd be a long painting to go and put in every one of those little stripes perfectly. So I'm just giving the impression. So now once I get some of those black marks in, I can go and add more paint in between again, just to kind of, jazz them up a little. They're kind of lost there. But I'm going to first go and put in some of that body color. So I got some white, and I'm just going to show you mixing. So I've got white and a little ultramarine blue and some of that transparent red oxide, and I'm just going to put in a little bit of that in there. Before I get too detailed on the blues, I want to finish blocking in. So this is just, a nice warm gray color made from white and some ultramarine blue and a little bit of transparent red, or you could use some transparent brown oxide, and you can get that nice grayish color. So I'm just kind of putting that in there. And then always down by the tail, you can go a little darker. So using some blue and red or brown oxide, to get that nice dark gray. I'll go a little darker near the tail so that it gives that, that nice shape of and also you can pop in a few fluffy feathers that way too, if you get some nice dark gray in there. And that's just some transparent red or brown oxide and a little white and some cobalt, or you could use ultramarine blue. And then you can get a little white and add it to the mix and just kind of add a little bit of a lighter color to those feathers. And I kind of leave some of that base color there because I want those feathers to show up. So might even get a little more white, and you can add a little tiny bit of, orange or something, just a tiny bit, not a lot, to really get that white to and I kind of dab on the edges there just to get some, I'll show you some of that white across that little collar. I'll just kind of go and dab some of that across. And then down here where you've got that nice, darker gray, you can go and add, just using the side of your brush like this, just really getting a little paint right on the tip of your brush, and then kind of just whipping a few of those feathers down. And then right here, there's a real highlight where the tail has a bit of that fur coming out. But I like to do that. And you can even pick up a little bit of that blue in there too. So now I want to get, while I'm zoomed in, I want to I like to play around a little bit with the pattern on his wings. So I'll go and I'm going to clean that little number 2 off, that bright, and get a little cobalt blue and some white. And, you know, if you want to get that real, there's almost a little bit of a turquoisey color. I could try maybe adding a tiny dab of iridium and seeing. But there's some real bright spots, like right on the edge there. So I'm just going to go and work on some of those lighter, brighter spots and just add more paint. So in between here, just pick out a few of those squares that you get them to shine a little. That's just the cobalt and the white make a good enough, you know, and I'm just going between some of those black marks I put on. I'm trying to paint over them. So you start to get that blue jay effect. You know, you get that, you start to see those details, you know, that you see on the bird, but they're not too hard to paint that way. Otherwise, like I say, you can go and paint more detailed, but I like just kind of giving this little impression here. I like to move on to new paintings and you know, try different colors and different things out. I don't want to, if I don't like the painting, just, you know, just move on. Don't worry about it. Some days are better than others for painting. And sometimes it's just, you know, the size of the canvas even. Like I say, if you're working on with something with all this really kind of more simple to fill in a canvas with, you better to go a little bigger, because you can also, you know, you can do it pretty quickly, and then you have a bigger painting, because you know, probably a lot of you resell your paintings, then you have something a little larger to put in an art show, or, you know, put on the wall and show. Okay, so now we've blocked in. Let me just add some legs. The poor bird. He's sitting there with no feet. It's a bad day if you can't find your feet. Okay, so there. Just gonna put just real simple. I know that's it for now for the feet. I'm not gonna worry too much. Maybe I'll just put a little dark mark in there to kind of show there's another foot there. But I think I'm gonna move on and go back to our leaves for a little bit. So I'm gonna zoom back out and moving back to my number 10 bright brush. So back to the one I initially blocked in with. And I'm gonna start adding, these are all transparent colors. So they're all colors you can, you know, literally see through. So now, and there's no white mixed into any of these leaves. So now the fun part is we're going to start picking out some of those shapes and work on, you know, I have this reference photo here to give me some idea of some of these pretty coral colors and, you know, some of those shapes and even some of the branches, you know, just to kind of, so I'll get some orange and white, and, you know, you can use your brush to mix, or you can use a little palette knife. Sometimes that is easier for doing leaves. So sometimes I'm going to get a little cad red in there to get that, or alizarin and orange and white will make a kind of a nice, you know, kind of a nice corally, leafy color. So you can mix up a bunch of different shades of orange this way quick, and you can get, you know, get some cad yellow light in there and maybe some Indian yellow and some white, and mix up another puddle that's kind of got your more golden yellowy leafy color. You can dull that down with a little transparent red oxide. That kind of creates more of a nice warmer kind of yellow leafy color. So you can do it that way. Let's maybe mix up a little bit of that pinky color. So I'm just adding a little cad red medium to the mix. Just down here in the corner, I've got a little more of that pinky red color. So that's white and some cad red, and can add a little bit of that cad yellow light. And that'll kind of make it a nice, you know, if it's too red for you, just add a little something to warm it up a little. Just, I added a little red oxide. That kind of makes it a little warmer. So you get a couple different colors. That's one way to do it. You know, maybe mix up a green puddle while you're at it. So get some viridian and white and a little brown oxide. You can use red oxide. You could use a little dab of burnt sienna, anything to kind of, you know, tone back the how bright green that is. So kind of graze it down a little when you add a little dab of that brown oxide or red oxide. So now I've got you. That's one way of doing it. Then you've got a few different bottles to dip in, and, you know, put paint down. So I'm gonna get some of my, let's see, we'll go with this, maybe this yellowy color first and see how that works. Maybe it needs a little more white. But you just kind of pick out some of the edges and, you know, get some of that other color. And you just kind of get some of those shapes that you've already got there. Just, you're working to just kind of give them a little more definition. But not going, you don't want to go and get too detailed, because the fun part of this painting is the fact that it has a little bit of that, you know, more kind of more, the leaves are kind of more of a fun abstract thing. They're not, you know, they're not super real. So you can have fun just kind of putting in, it takes a little restraint, but just put in some of those edges with the side of your brush, and then you can, you know, soften some of them away. But, and I'm dabbing in each one of those colors. I'm kind of mixing them up, you see. So, because fall leaves always have, you know, they always have so many different colors. And then up here, same thing. I'll just go and put in some of those edges. And grab some of that more yellow color and just, you know, kind of, again, you're just kind of really just playing around with these colors. You're not getting too stuck on any particular leaf or anything. I'm not focusing in on one. You can add the odd, you know, you can put a little dash of a little more red in one or two of them, you know, if you want. It's all, you know, kind of up to you. Now what you might want to do is take a little breather from before you get too carried away on one color. Go back now and kind of clean your brush and go into your, you know, greens, and maybe I'll try this green out here. It might be a little too bright, but we'll see. Oh yeah, that's bright. Okay, so I'll just take a little, maybe I'll mix a little sap green into that and a little tiny bit more of that brown oxide or something to dull it down a little. And this is a real cool green, so don't go, you know, you don't want to go too crazy with that. You don't want to cover up a lot of those nice, you know, warm greens. So maybe you get a little more sap in there and some orange to really warm it up a little. So some sap and orange, and see how that works, just to warm it up a little. And I don't want to paint over too much of these nice warm transparent colors. So I'm kind of just, you know, going with the flow and putting in some of these brush strokes. Maybe I'll take a little bit of that lighter color and just kind of gray it down a little. So I'm just having fun with the different edges, and you can add a bit of more, you can even add a little cobalt blue in there. I'm going to put a little cobalt blue into near the bottom, and maybe in a few areas I'll put a little dash of cobalt blue here and there, just to kind of, you know, put in some of the color of the bird in there. And then I'm gonna get some of that green and kind of gray it down a little more. And I'll gray down the green and kind of just, you know, put in some of that up here. And so you start to see your own little pattern. So you can get a smaller brush and just so you can work in a little more detail. And I'm just gonna you can just work in a little bit more detail that way. And I think I'll go back now. I've got lots of green happening. I don't want to go too much more with the green. I want to go back and maybe, you know, work on adding a little bit of that reddy, orangey color. So I've got I added a little alizarin to the mix. And in the mix was alizarin and some cad yellow light. And I put in some Indian yellow and some white. So just kind of something to get that, orangey color. And I'm just going to go and bring across a few more details with those lighter colored leaves. So I'm using a number 4 flat, and I'm just gonna kind of bring out some of the detail work here. But I'm leaving a lot of that transparent color in there. And then I'm gonna go back now and I'm gonna get in some of that gray background color because I wanna work some of that background into the leaves too. So I used, just mixing up some gray here, I used some cobalt and white, and just trying to make a warm gray. Just gonna see what this might be too cold. Maybe a little. So just try to make something that's gray but not too cool. So I added some white, and there's some, let me see what this looks like. It's kind of a greeny gray. Maybe a little more Indian yellow in there. So you kind of, yeah, that wouldn't be too bad because the greeny gray might be the best for this one to go with the leaves. So I'll go over that. That's white and, let me see, cobalt blue and some transparent red oxide, and I think I added some Indian yellow. And that kind of makes a greenish gray color. So I want to pop in some of that background into the picture again. So, you can mix a little bit of the gray and you can add a little bit of the, more blue or something, or just to darken it a little. And then I'm going to look at kind of a pattern here. I've got also I want to think of got to either lighten the bird a little or darken the background, because I'll run into trouble right here where the gray is kind of the same value as the bird. So I think what I did in my painting is I just got a little bit more of the white feather and, got that in there so that it's brighter than the background. So around the bird, you just kind of can tweak the value a little of your background. And then where it gets darker down here on the bird, I kind of go with a little bit lighter version, just so that, again, it kind of shows up a little better. So I just want to work in this background so I can show you how I finish my background with all these colors and everything. So I'm I'm gonna go quick as I can. And this is the part where you need to be able to fast forward. So I'm just working this color in, and then we'll be able to adjust our values on the edges and everything before we move on. And I try to not just outline the bird with the background. You can outline, but then make sure you bring your brush strokes, to the bird and mix it up a little so you don't just have like a halo going around the bird. So I'm just going to keep working that in, and you might want to go with a little lighter background color right there, because then that little tuft of hair or feathers, will show up a little. So you just kind of pay attention to those edges, and you can change your values along with it, just to bring out the most in the edges of your bird. So now that I'm getting some more of that color down, you can start to see the background as a pattern too, and a shape. So you can see that the leaves are forming a shape, but then you want to work a little bit of that background into the whole overall composition shape too. So I'll take a little bit of that. I'll see that we've got a little color here, and then it's kind of going straight up. So I'll just take a little bit of that background color and kind of dull it down a little more, using some of the green or some blue, something to kind of dull it down. And I'm just gonna look at this area, and maybe I'll bring a few little sky holes up into these side areas here. So maybe we'll put in one here, just to balance it out a little and get some of that sky. And if you see it as a shape, you want to kind of branch it through a little. So, and you can tone them down a little, and you can kind of cut into your. So now we've got, the background working its way through the leaves a little. It looks like a nice balance. Now you just want to pay attention to some of these edges. So some of these edges here could be sharper, but some of the edges further up here, maybe I want them to be more subtle and more, less engaging. So I'm going to kind of soften those edges into the background a little, just using my brush. And you could take, some of that gray and mix it into that green color, and So it's like a more muted leaf that's kind of there, but not there. It's further away in the background more. So kind of, you know, just dulls those shapes down a little. Just kind of, just a little, you know. And then maybe soften those edges. So those edges are, you know, they were very sharp because of the color was quite dark. You just take a little bit of this orange and kind of bring it into the background a little. And I like to take some of the color and just for fun, I like to flick some into the background. I'll take a little blue, you know, whatever you feel you want to do. I might get some little bits of red, and I'll put a few little flecks of red here and there, just for fun. And you can put a few highlights on some of these leaves here. Just add a little, I'm just adding a little more white to that light, you know, orangey goldy mix. And it's here you got to be careful because you can start overworking the leaves. And the whole point, I think, of this painting was to have it more of a contemporary look. So I kind of didn't want to make it too overly detailed. So you know, don't get too fussy over your leaves. Now we got to go back because our bird needs a little more detail. And I want to go back now that I've got the background, and I want to, you know, add the highlight on his little head. So I'm going to go get some cobalt and white, and make sure your paint's, you know, clean. I'm trying to take it from the back of my white pile, not the front, because the front is got too much yellow in it. So just put a little highlight there. And okay, and then so you might want to, I just want to get his eye a little darker. And then I like to put a little highlight on the eye. So I'll take a little white, just use the tip of my brush, and just put just a little bit of light on there. Even if I don't see it in the photo, I always do that because it just makes them look a lot more alive to have some little sparkle, you know. And then I'm going to get a little white and just kind of make sure that shape is a little bit more clear. And just kind of, I'll dab a few feathers here and there. So I get a little more fussy over the bird than the leaves, as you can see. And you can, you know, just kind of get a little more blue on the wingtips there. Just a few details where I like to put those feathers across, and then I'll do the same here, just kind of just get a few fluffy looking feathers there. Put a little highlight there. You can get a little blue and put a little light, a little bit of a highlight on his little feet there. So now I'm gonna, you can get a thinner brush or just use the edge of your larger brush, or if you have something like a little round brush, you can get a bit of that brown oxide or red oxide and get your brush with a little bit of that terp and some of the black. And I'm gonna go and put a few branches in and kind of darken just at the very base of that branch. Just get a little bit of darkness in there, adds a little dimension to your branch again. And you don't have to have it going all the way through. Just pick a little area. And then I pick a few little random branch shapes, and I'll just kind of put a few twigs in there. I don't even know where they're going. I just put them in there just for some small detail. You know, just one or two. And then you can even get a little bit of that blue and white and, you know, put a little bit of a highlight on a few of them so they're not just pure black. Sometimes you can just draw them in with a little bit of a bluey color, you know. So again, don't get too carried away. I sometimes will put in too many, but you know, you just kind of look around at your painting, and I'll go and I'll maybe tweak the edge of this branch a little. Put in a little bit of a highlight. You can use a little bit of that orange maybe. Just put a tiny bit of a light highlight in there. And I'll just look at things in the painting that I want to draw a little more detail. So I'll go and put a little bit more cobalt blue back into his little tufted feathers there, just to get them a little they show up a little more. And I'll go look at my reference photo and, you know, kind of tweak the drawing here and there. His neck needed to be a little bigger. When you first start painting, you're not as artistic as you are near the end of your painting. In the beginning, you're more in the warm-up mode. So usually it's not till the end that your eyes are even like able to see some of your you know, where you maybe didn't draw it or didn't paint it the way you wanted to. So it's good to go and look at everything you did initially again and see if you're happy with it. Put a little highlight on this feather. And if you add white and you add a tiny bit of Indian yellow to it, it really gets way brighter and more vivid. So it's a little trick. If you just add a tiny touch of like orange or Indian yellow, you know, you'll get a much brighter looking white. So I'm just going to kind of just go and touch up those little brush strokes. They were a little, I put them in quickly in the beginning, but I kind of thought maybe I'll add a little more life to those. And then at the end of the tail, there's a little bit of white showing just on the edge, so we can add a little bit of that detail. And then I'll look at my leaves again and maybe, you know, tweak a little bit of the color here and there. So I'm just kind of, you know, looking around and, you know, making sure I like what I see. And so that's just some of that bright viridian color I had, that's white and viridian with a little red oxide. So, you know, I think I'm looking at this and I'm thinking I don't want to overkill on the details. So that's the trick. You don't want to go to a small brush, too small a brush. You start, you know, you start getting too much detail. So I might just take my larger brush and, you know, I can just soften some of these edges just using, you know, wiping my brush each time and, you know, soften a few of these edges off. Just kind of set some of those back a little. So I'm just wiping each time and pulling some of that color across. And it just kind of softens everything a little. Especially off on the edges, you know, you don't want your eyes to go too and get into too much detail there. So I might just get a little bit more cobalt and white and get just a little hit of more of that highlight on his shoulder there. That's just some white and some cobalt there. Okay, well, I'm maybe just kind of soften that tail up. I like the edges of the tail to just be kind of soft because your eye doesn't, I want the eye to go more, you know, in this area. So I think all I could do now is kind of start overworking this little guy. So I think I'll call it a day. I could add a few lighter hits of gray in the background just to, you know, add some variety. But I think that's all, unless someone has a question. that they want to ask. I'll switch the cameras in a second and we can do that. So I think that's it for now.